guys, it's Kelly Lanabola here, and I am back with another video for W+9. Today we're going to be using just one stamp set. It's called Santa's Reindeer. I think it's so super cute, and you could use it for a ton of different cards. I'm also going to be using the new 4-bar rectangle dies, and I would show you how I did the die cutting, but unfortunately my big shot is in an area where I can't film. So basically what I did was one of the medium ones I lined up on the left, and then I did 3 of the smaller ones on the right, and I just lined them up so that the stitching lined up. And then to make a bigger window, I'm going to go ahead and cut out the middle section from the top 2. And the reason I decided to do that was because I couldn't show enough of the reindeer in 3 little windows, and I wanted to show more of them. So here, this is what the final piece looks like, and I did cut it down smaller than my card front. But I'm going to hold it in place and then just trace around those windows with a pencil. And the reason I'm doing this is so when I'm doing my stamping, I know where that window is going to end. I knew I wanted to pop it up on foam so you would be able to see around the edges of it. I'm going to be stamping in Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, and I'm just giving myself a little pencil mark of where I want the roof or snow, I guess, depending on how you look at it. It's a roof because there's a chimney, where I want the roof to start. I wanted his little bag to be propped up against the chimney, so I stamped that first. When you're doing anything that's one layer, whatever you want to be in the forefront, you have to stamp first. So I stamped the bag, and then I'm going to go ahead and stamp the chimney, and I will mask that as well so that I can stamp Santa and he'll look like he's popping out of the chimney. For this particular part of the scene, I didn't have to mask off any of the edges because everything fit perfectly in the window. For the reindeer, I have to mask off the edges because they're going to be hanging out. And whenever you have a window card, you want those clean edges. So I didn't want just extra stamping that was hanging off the side. So I'm going to stamp one reindeer to the right. He's going to be in the forefront. So I'm going to mask him off. I didn't take the time to fussy cut out his ears. What are those things called? They're not ears. I can't even think of it. Horns? Antlers. Oh my goodness. Woo, it's late. I didn't take the time to fussy cut his ears because I knew I wasn't going to be stamping over him. So just really his body is what I paid most of the attention to. I wanted the sentiment in this set is just a little bit smaller than this particular window, so I wanted to fill it in and just give it some interest. So in this set there are some music notes that are included. So I'm using W+9 Silver Lining ink to just kind of stamp a subtle background, and it'll get more subtle as we add in the Copic coloring. So here I've picked out some blues, blue violets and violet to do the background, the sky portion. Normally I would mask everything and then I would use distressing, so I would get a really good blend in my sky. I'm not that confident in my abilities to blend Copics that well in large areas, but I thought that maybe even though this is larger, it's not the whole card, so maybe I could make it work. And I was actually really surprised at how easy it was. So if you haven't done this before, maybe give it a go and see how that works. I added the darker blue to the top of the sky. I wanted that area to be to fit like from dark to light, to fade down. And then I just randomly picked spots to add in the violet color, just so that the background wouldn't be plain. I wanted it to have some interest on its own. And then I used the blue violet to blend that in to the blues that I already had laid down. I did add a little bit more of that maybe toward the top. Again, just trying to get that interest. Right now it looks really streaky, but you'll see as I blend in with the other colors, with the blues, and then finally give the whole thing one more coat of the lightest blue, they really did blend quite well together. So I did the same thing for the sky behind the reindeer. I just didn't show it. I thought it would be a little redundant, but I did exactly the same thing. Just picked areas, added in those violets, blended them out. We're going to start coloring the rooftop now, and I used just really light cool grays. I felt like because the sky was blue, well, I have a natural preference for cooler grays, but because the sky was blue, that it wouldn't make sense to use a warm gray. I thought it would just look like dirty brown snow, and I didn't really want that. So I just added some lines. I'm using a super light hand and a flicking motion, and coming in from the edges, putting maybe a little bit in the center, because when you look at snow on a rooftop, there's shingles underneath there. There's, peaks and valleys. It isn't just usually flat, with no dimension. I mean, it doesn't have a ton because it's snow, but I didn't want it to be just flat and boring. I wanted it to have something in the foreground. So I'm using the same markers to color in the snow on the chimney. And that was just two quick little colors. It's a smaller area. And now I'm going to use those same two colors, the C1 and the C3, I'm sorry, just the C1. Just the C1. I'm not telling the truth here. I'm taking it in from the edges of my pencil line, so where that window is going to show, and I'm just flicking it into the center. I'm being careful around those edges to make sure that they're coming in at an angle so it makes sense. But this is going to soften up those music notes and create like a highlight portion in the center for where the sentiment's going to sit. I also picked a super light blue violet and went in and added some of that to the snow. It's going to give it more of a bluish purple feel. And I did the same thing around that sentiment area. I just, again, felt like it added a little bit more interest. It didn't look so flat. Now, discarding the blue violet, I'm going back to those same C colors to do his beard, his little puff ball on the end of his cap, his gloves, and what else? Oh, his little, the band around his hat. So for his beard, I really just went in and made some stripes. I used the darker color to pull in where it was already drawn like a zigzag edge. I just kind of deepened up those edges and brought them up. And this is just to give his beard some texture and blending them out as I'm working. I didn't color the entire beard. I just really used streaks or flicks of color. So once I had all of the grays done on him, I went ahead and switched over to the reds for his bag and his suit. Here, the way his bag is drawn, there's an indent at the top and then like right where it's being gathered. So I wanted there to be a highlight on the edge of that. So you'll see I left that white portion. That's something that I just personally do because I have a tendency to what I call eat my highlight. I have a tendency to color over it, and so then I don't get as much dimension as I could because I don't have a super light area. So I'm adding in the deepest colors where the indent of the bag gathering is, and then also, working my way toward the bottom so it looks like a true red. The darkest color is this R59, and I'm adding just a little bit of it to the bottom of the bag and then into that indent as well. And then we're just going to blend everything out on our way back to using the lightest color where we will finally cover up that completely white highlight. That's just what works for me. If you have another way of approaching it, that's totally okay. There isn't a right or wrong way to do it. That's just what works for me. With his hat, I really wanted it to look like the top of it was kind of flopping over the front. So I added a lot of darker color into that crease. Now I switched over. Normally I start with my lightest and work out to my darkest, but I'm kind of still working on my process for doing shading on clothing and folds. And so when I'm doing that, I have a tendency to go to my darkest color first so I know where my shadows are going to be. It's something that's still kind of like a process for me. I really have to think about it, and I always end up going over it twice. So this was the first result, and I didn't love it. So here I'm going back in again and, deepening up those shadows. I realized that my highlight was too large and that the underneath of the hat flopping over wasn't dark enough. It was too light. So I just changed that. There's the wonderful thing about Copics is you really can add a ton of ink to the paper before you get any pilling or anything like that. So I'm not going to show you his whole Santa suit. I didn't do a ton of shading here, just underneath his beard and underneath his arms, also under his belt where he's kind of popping out of the chimney. That, should be dark as well. But I didn't really feel like I needed to show you everything because I'm just literally going over the lines. Now we're going to move on to his face. The area was so small. I'm used to coloring with 4 colors, and so I almost cannot help myself. It's funny how your habits are, but I just added shading underneath his hat and behind his nose. That was it. That's all I added the shading to. We're going to switch over to the darker cool grays now to do his black belt. So C5 is going to be my lightest color, and I'm coloring it as if the highlight is in the center. Just, trying to get that dimension. It would be darker where it wrapped around his body, and it would be darker where his belt buckle was. So that automatically leaves the center as the highlight. And I'm really just adding in little lines of color for the black, the 100. I'm just making little lines next to the belt and next to his sides. And then I'm just going to go back through out to the 5 to kind of blend that all in so it looks black instead of gray. For his belt buckle, I just made of almost like an L shape, and then blended that out with the C3. I didn't really know, I mean, it's not a distinct belt buckle. There's a lot of detail to it, so I was just trying to do something to make it a little more interesting. The greens I used to color in the holly on the one reindeer's ear, and then also to color in the collar on the second reindeer. I also used those grays to color in the silver bells on there. The E20s is what I picked to do my reindeer, and this is not, it's a warmer brown, but it is not as warm as like the 50 family. So I felt like it would be a really good fit for the super dark background. I am doing the shading on this reindeer as if the light source is coming in from the right. And even though I showed you all 4 colors, I use all 4 colors on the left deer. On the right hand deer, I didn't use the E29. That back leg would fall behind this reindeer, so it would automatically be darker. So I filled that in with the E25. So anything that's darker falls to the background. If you watch any of my videos, you've heard me say this before. And then I'm just, filling in those antlers, now that I know what I'm talking about, right? Antlers. And then branching out the color as I get a little bit more comfortable with where the highlights are going to be. So we're just going to blend that all out, and then I will go over it once more with the lightest color to bring everything together. Like I said, I'm going to use the same colors for the deer in the background, but I'm going to also add in that E29, so it will not only look darker just because of the way that we're shading it, but part of the reason that we're doing that is because he is behind the other deer. So I wanted him, again, anything darker falls into the background. So that's what I wanted. I wanted him to appear as if he was really behind this other deer. I'm doing the shading the same way as if the light source was in the top right hand corner. So his cute little rump will be highlighted. That's the right hand side of his face will be highlighted. The part of his neck where his face isn't covering it will be highlighted. Underneath the collar, there should be shadows. There should be shadows on the left-hand side, and then that back leg that you can see underneath the other reindeer would be darker as well. We're going to add in that E29 to really darken everything up, and then go back and work again out toward the lightest color. This, anytime you add in that 4th color, that darker color, everything just kind of naturally gets darker because you're adding more of your midtones as well, so there's less of a highlight area. And then they really do, that one really does look like he's behind the other one. For the chimney, I just used colors that I already had out. So I used the browns that I used for the reindeer and the reds that I had used for Santa Claus, just to put in some dimension. All of them are 2 colors. I just picked like a medium and a dark to just go ahead and do the shading with, just so that there was lots of interest going on there as well. Now here, all of the coloring is done, but we're going to do something to make the background a little bit more interesting. I'm using a colorless blender, and I'm just making large dots in the sky. This works best on darker colors, and sometimes you do have to go over those dots more than once to push the color out, but what it does is like bleach it, so they look like big fat falling snowflakes, which you could totally leave and it would look super cool. But I have a problem with details and I want to add them all the time, so I'm also going in with a white gel pen and adding in some more softer snowflakes, which I really, really love the way the background turned out. I outline all of my images because that's just how I roll, so I'm going to go ahead and do that with a writing pen, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment using W+9's Pure Black ink. This is, it's just such a good ink to stamp with. I love it. I've never had any issues. Now we're going to add the frame, and so I'm using Scotch foam tape and just strips. I'm covering the entire every single line. None of it will not be covered with Scotch foam tape, and the reason is because I don't want part of it to sag. Before I adhere the frame to it, I forgot to add my clear Wink of Stella, which is, I can't even believe I almost forgot to add it, because all Christmas cards should have shimmer on them. Well, all cards should have shimmer on them, really, but particularly Christmas cards for me. And then I'm going to peel off the foam adhesive. I'm going to set it down there kind of gently to make sure I'm happy with the way it's lined up, double check it, and then go ahead and push it down so that everything is all good and adhered. It's not going anywhere. And that is the entire card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that maybe you learned a little bit of something, and I will see you guys for the next video. Bye.